It used to drive me crazy when I was a kid, and my mother would make us liverwurst sandwiches. Always hated liverwurst. But my mother would make me eat it anyway, and she'd say something really inane, like, there are starving kids in China. Eat your liverwurst sandwich. And it never, ever made sense to me how my indigestion could somehow ease the hunger pangs of somebody halfway around the world. But then it was explained to me much later in my life. You see, we live in a global economy. So if I go and I buy 2 loaves of bread but end up throwing 1 loaf away, what I have done is create a false demand on wheat. And the price of wheat goes up. And so people who are living on the edge of poverty suddenly find themselves unable to purchase a loaf of bread because I wasted what I had and it made the cost rise. There is a direct connection between my wastefulness and somebody else's hunger. It's one of the problems that other nations, especially third world nations, have with America is we are so wasteful. And I think it's a really valid complaint that we understand the cost and the worth of everything, but the value of little. We know that a loaf of bread is worth about $3 or $4, but to a starving family, the value is immeasurable. There is a difference between worth and value. Worth is decided by factors that are largely out of our control. They're decided by things like the law of supply and demand. They're decided by the market. Value is something different, though. Value is what we bring to it. Value is what we decide is important and how important it is. And so a Lamborghini might be worth $100,000, but if I don't drive, it has very little value to me. Jesus gives the parable of the wealthy young man who builds larger and larger barns to store his bumper crop. Now, in first century Palestine, there was a worldview that thought that everything was already created and allotted out, and everybody was given the same thing. So if one person has more than somebody else, he has more at the expense of someone else. So if I have 3 camels, it means that 2 people have none. It's why Jesus talks so negatively about the wealthy. It should always be read as greedy. So he's talking about the greed. He's talking about the greed of a man who has this bumper crop of food, which means that all around him people have none. The more he has, the less other people have. And so he could build a barn and store everything up and just think about his net worth. What his worth is. And he completely neglects the value of feeding the hungry. It's something that we do all the time. We are drawn by things like cost. We can calculate the cost of feeding people on our southern border. We can calculate the cost of giving them health care and providing housing and shelter and food, water and clothing. We can calculate that cost, and that cost can be a little bit overwhelming. But what we miss is the value of alleviating the suffering of another human being. That cannot be measured, and that cannot be given by anybody but us. Koheles says vanity of vanities. All things are vanities. When he says vanity, he's talking about vapor, air. It's chasing the wind. And he's saying that every time we do things like store things up, every time we are drawn and moved by the worth, by the cost of something, and neglect the value, we are just chasing after the wind. It's vanity. There's a higher value than there is worth. St. Paul tells the Colossians that they should seek from what is above. And the cause of our anxiety, the cause of our depression, the cause of our sadness, the cause of our anger, the cause of every problem that we have is because we keep chasing after the wind, is because we keep on chasing after that which we think has worth but has very little value. And we neglect the things that have the most value. And so he says, seek the things from heaven. What comes from above are things like peace. Seek peace. Love, generosity, graciousness, mercy, holiness. Seek hope. We seek those things which come from above, and we do. And we've all experienced those things at one time or another, and we get the value. We understand the value of those blessings that come to us from heaven. The problem is that we are so easily distracted, and we always have been. We are a people that is so easily distracted that we can receive that which is of such great value on 1 minute, and in the next minute be distracted by something that's happening on earth, by something that's happening on the ground, and we start chasing after the wind again. We can receive this great sense of peace from our God and then turn on the TV, watch everything that's going on in the world, and all of a sudden we're in turmoil again. All of a sudden we forget the power of God. We can receive hope from God and then all of a sudden get a call from a doctor and fall into despair. We get that which is most valuable to us, but we don't really treasure it. That is nothing new. We are not alone there. It has always been. How many times did God have to remind his people in the desert of everything that he has done for them? Didn't I take you out of the land of Egypt and slavery? Didn't I set you free? Didn't I make water come out of that rock? Didn't I make bread rain down from heaven? Didn't I make quail show up in your camps? Didn't I do everything that you needed me to do? Didn't I walk with you every step that you took in the desert? Why do you think that I'm going to leave you now? Just because there's another problem. We have always been this way. We have always been the kind who can receive that hope and the power and the grace and generosity from God in 1 minute. And the minute something happens in our life, we forget it, we forsake it, and we start chasing after the wind. One of my favorite songs that we sing here is that song which goes, I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me now. I love it because it's a reminder to us. It doesn't tell us something that we don't know, but it tells us something that we have forgotten. It reminds us that God has done great things for us. It reminds us that God has already reached his hand down and touched our hearts with peace, with joy, with hope, with love, with generosity. God has already done such great things for us. And when we remember what he has done, we remember what he will do. When we can stand firm in those things that come from above, we are not chasing after wind. We stand strong. We stand united. We stand in hope. We stand in peace. We stand in love. We cannot control what happens in our world. We cannot control what the doctor would tell us. We cannot control what our economists will say. We cannot control anything that is happening here. But what we can do is keep seeking from above that which keeps us focused on what we need to be focused, that which is most valuable. We're in another election season, in all due respect. And I do find myself watching more and more, being drawn more and more to the 24-hour news stations that I had sworn off a year ago. And I'm back to it, and every time I look at it, I hear people say things like, this is unprecedented. This has never happened before. I keep hearing people arguing over whether or not our president's tweets are racist or not. I don't know why we're arguing about that. It is so obvious. It either is or it isn't. If you don't believe that it is, you will never believe that it is. And nothing I say to you is ever going to change your mind. It's chasing after the wind. It's vanity of vanities. There is something more valuable that is available to us than having these silly, stupid arguments. Something valuable comes from heaven. Nothing of value comes from the earth. That which is below is vanity of vanities. Seek the value that comes from above. Seek the peace, the holiness, the generosity, the kindness. Seek the love. Seek the holiness. Seek from God that which we hold most valuable. And stop chasing after the wind.